Okay. So we will sit together for around 30 minutes. I will provide some basic instructions for newcomers to meditation and a few instructions for old comers to meditation. Okay, if everyone is ready, settle yourself into a comfortable posture. For those who are new to meditation, put your attention onto the sensation of breathing as it runs through the center of the body. You may follow the breath up and down, or you may hold attention still while the breath passes by. We try to be with every breath. The breath is a neutral object. It's not exciting or enticing. So naturally the mind will want to wander away. There's always something more interesting to think about, to do. The art of meditation is to be able to settle your attention onto a calm object. The mind will take on the characteristic of whatever you attend to. So we attend to this sensation of the breathing. You train yourself one breath at a time to be able to stay in the present moment. When the mind wanders away, you note where the mind has wandered to. Did it start listening to things around you? Did it wander off to the past? Has it wandered off to the future? Planning, thinking, meals, holidays, houses, worries. The good meditator is able to interrupt whatever story occupies the mind, to break from it and return to the breathing. The ability to break or to let go of the story is their ability to freedom. Stress and discomfort in the mind and the body is caused from attachment to thoughts and stories and feelings. So the meditator trains themselves to interrupt whatever stories arise in the mind and stop, let it go, and bring the attention back to the breathing. The mind may become bright or dull. Attention may be sharp, may be loose. You may get lost in thinking for 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 20 minutes before you realize. So we try to train this attention so you know all the time where the mind is, what the mind is doing. The breath will be an indicator or barometer for your state of mind. The breath is strong, rapid, high up in the chest, low down in the abdomen. It's a good indicator for your state of mind. So make this breathing a comfortable friend, a place to rest your attention. There's no need to control it, no need to breathe in harder or faster or slower. Your body has been breathing your whole life. Just leave it to do its thing. For those who are more accustomed to meditation, note where the mind has wandered to. Be willing to bring your attention back time after time after time. Ask yourself, what remains, what flowers presents itself when the mind isn't picking up any object at all? Anything you can see, you don't get involved with it. Internal or external, near or far away, coarse or refined. You don't get involved with that thing you can see. The thing you can hear, internal or external, near or far away, coarse or refined. You don't pay attention to the signs and features of the sound. Feelings in the body, internal or external, near or far away, coarse or refined. Don't pay attention to the signs and features of those feelings. Anything you can taste or smell, the same. Any thought that occurs to you, you don't get involved in the signs and features of that thought, internal or external, near, far away, coarse or refined. You're holding yourself in awake, aware limbo. The effort is one of restraint, restraining the mind from picking up objects of attention. After some time, you start to identify this still limbo state. It starts to become brighter and stronger. You can turn your attention away from thoughts and feelings and sounds and sights. Set your attention just on this internal blossoming awareness. The body may appear very large or very small. Body awareness can appear full body, seeing it with awareness, and it appears pleasant. If this happens, you can move into the pleasant experience. Drop your meditation object. Piti or rapture can ignite an intensification through the center of the body. This pleasant sensation is okay to be enjoyed. It's good meditation. The rapture can subside, sukha, happiness, contentment that is vivid, energized, intensified sense of presence. And an equanimity or equipoise that is very clear, very intense, very awake. These are some of the experiences that are the correct, deepening experiences that come through meditation. You can't generate them or make them happen. You just hold yourself in restraint and they start to appear. Be willing to meditate from whatever mind state you are at. So your mind may be dull or sleepy, caught in desire, caught in worry, caught in ill will or hatred, or caught in doubt. These are hindrances. So be willing to meditate from whatever state of mind you are currently at, continually trying to awaken, purify consciousness. So we'll sit together for another 15 minutes or so. For the last few minutes of the meditation, call into mind the idea of gratitude and appreciation, reminding yourself, reminding ourselves to be grateful for the things that we have. It's a beautiful antidote to greed. Is to remember to take time to think on and appreciate. You have good enough health, good enough finances, good enough family and friends. Live in a society safe enough, free from fires and floods and war. We all have a lot to be appreciative of. And taking some time just to add into the meditation, to call into the mind deliberately, to foster, to welcome, to maintain this feeling of appreciation, gratitude. This is a sobana citta, means a beautiful mind state. All beautiful mind states need to be deliberately aroused and encouraged. Else we spend too much time thinking on the things that we want to get, the things that we dislike. So we take a few moments just to deliberately arouse in the mind, maintain in the mind the idea of gratitude and appreciation for the things that you have. Sabbhe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabbhaso sabba buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhagwantu te. Sabbhe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabbhaso sabba Dhamma nubhavena sattha soti bhagwantu te. Sabbhe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabbhaso sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhagwantu te. Okay, relax your posture. Okay, welcome everyone to this evening's session. To mix things up a little bit, to change the topics, I'm going on to one of my favourite topics, fairy tales. Now, Arti, last time you came here was Snow White, right? Since then, I didn't do any fairy tales. I don't do this every week. So there is a fairy tale. I should mention that fairy tales or frozen dreams are depictions of the psyche, and the reason they don't make very much sense to normal people is because they're not following rules of society, they're following the rules of the psyche. You can also think about them as like shared dreams. So the way of analyzing fairy tales, classic fairy tales of Europe, Russia has a lot, is to view them from the psychological perspective. And that's why they don't make sense in normal course of things. And it's a great shame that people like Madonna have been rewriting fairy tales and changing them, and they completely misunderstand the original meanings, which is very frustrating. Do you know the story of the north wind, the cold north wind and the sun having a battle? And they decide which one is stronger. So the north wind says he's stronger than the sun. So they have a competition, and the north wind blows and blows and blows on a person down in the world, and they just huddle deeper into their coat. The competition is who can make the person take their coat off. So the wind blows and blows and blows, and he doesn't take his coat off. And then he finally is exhausted, and the sun just shines, and the man takes his coat off. I remember being told this as a child, and our teacher said that the story didn't make sense. So she said, well, what it is, when the wind's blowing and the sun's out, the wind seems like a nice breeze. So that's why he takes his coat off. I was like, it doesn't make any sense. So that story was about how you interact with other people. That if you are cold or fierce or unthinking or unfeeling, overly logical, like many mothers will overpower you, overbear you, right? Then the person will huddle deeper into their defenses. If you want to really connect with people, then you just shine, just be beautiful, and they will automatically open their defenses. So fairy tales need to be understood in the right way, and when we do, they're full of Dhamma. This evening's fairy tale is the cat. It's called The Cat and Mouse in Partnership. So feel free to look it up, because I will always forget some aspects of the story. In this tale, the cat and the mouse decide that they're going to share a house together. And you already know this is going to be disastrous, right? But they're quite organized, and they take care of each other. And one of them, I think the mouse, says to the cat, you know, we should really prepare for winter to make sure we have enough food over winter. And so they pool their money together and they buy a big pot of fat. Now this may mean cream, I'm not sure. Grimm's fairy tale, they translate from the German. It's a pot of fat or lard or something. So they buy this pot of fat, and the mouse says, now we need to find somewhere to store it. And so they have a think, and the cat says, I know where we should store it. We should store it in the local church. Good idea, says the mouse. So the cat takes the fat off to the church and put it somewhere safe there. Winter, the summer is progressing, and the cat starts licking its lips, thinking about this pot of fat. So he says to the mouse, in my mind the cat is male, the mouse is female, but I may be stereotyping. I'm not sure the original is specific on this. So the cat's the evil one, so we'll call him a he. So the cat says to the mouse, you know, I have a cousin who's getting married, who's having a child, and they are having a christening in the local church. So I really need to go and be the godparent at the christening. And the little mouse says, okay, you should do that. So the cat takes himself off to the church, and he gets out the pot of fat and licks the top off the fat. And he jumps up onto the roofs and prowls around, looking for opportunities and licking his lips or licking his whiskers. So eventually the cat goes back home, and the mouse says, was this a good christening? He said, yes. The mouse says, what was the name of the child? Or the kitten? I don't know. It's not specific. And the cat says, the name was Top Off. Mouse says, that's a funny name for a child. He says, well, you're a bit funny yourself. And so a few more weeks pass, or a month, and the cat's starting to think about this pot of fat again. So he says to the mouse, look, another friend of mine, another relative is having a christening, so I have to go and join in the christening. The mouse says, you should do that. He takes himself off, and he finds the pot of fat, and he eats it till it's half gone. And then he leaves, he jumps up onto the roof, and he says, he had a really nice line, things are always more delicious when they're eaten by yourself. So he goes back home, and the mouse says to him, so what was the name of the child? And the cat says, the child's name was Half Gone. The mouse says, this is a funny name for a child. A few more weeks go by, and the cat once again is thinking about the pot of fat. So he says to the mouse, I have to go to a christening in the local church. And the mouse says, okay, you should do that. So he takes himself off to the church, gets out the pot of fat, and finishes it off. He said to himself, another funny line, if I can remember it correctly. He says to himself, one can never rest until everything is eaten. Goes back home, and the mouse says, what was the name of the child that was christened? He says, the child was christened, all gone. So the time goes by, and it comes up to winter, so the mouse says, look, we're getting a bit hungry now, let's take ourselves off to the church and get our pot of fat. So they go off to the church, and they go to the pot of fat, and the mouse sees it and sees that it's empty. And the mouse says, hang on a minute, I'm starting to figure out what happened here. You've been eating this pot of fat, haven't you? He said, that's why you said top off. And the cat says, don't. That's why you said the next child was called Half Gone. And the cat said, now be quiet now, otherwise I'll eat you. And the mouse is already on a roll and can't stop itself and says, that's why the third child was called. And the cat jumps on the mouse. It says, called All Gone, and eats the mouse. Now you see why European children are so messed up. So the story is one of having a conscience. There's a story about conscience. So the mouse, a talking mouse in a fairy tale, almost always represents conscience. Because your conscience, which means your sense of right and wrong, just if you're not a native English speaker, this is not consciousness, this is conscious. Conscience, the sense of right and wrong, or in Buddhism is called hiri-ottappa, which is moral shame and moral dread. these two things, moral shame and moral dread, in Buddhism are said to be guardians of the world. These are good things, not bad things, despite what your therapist tells you. So, the mouse is the voice of conscience because it's very small and it has just a small voice and it's not very powerful and it's not very convincing. The cat in the story is the voice of greed. And the voice of greed is very smart and has very good reasons for doing what it does. It's very sneaky and very strong and very powerful. So the voice of greed in your mind will always overpower the voice of conscience unless you pay attention, unless you value conscience, unless you feed your mouse and starve your cat. It's so easy for the voice of greed to overpower your conscience. This happened to me. Some of you know the story. Many years ago, when I first ordained in Thailand, and I was in a forest, well, an upcountry temple, and it's quite a nice place, but it was quite rough living, and the food was all meat, and I was vegetarian, so I had a hard time with the food, and there weren't many treats. We weren't starved, and we didn't have malnutrition like some of the monks the generation before me. But it's quite rare that you got a nice thing. And one day I was on my way to the sala for lunch, and there were some lay people there, and the layperson offered me a can of Coke. Now, you don't understand because you all live in the world and you can just buy a can of Coke if you want a can of Coke. But when you can't, and when you haven't had one and you just got white rice and meat every day, a can of Coke is like, zing. It's like a little halo around it, and it was cold as well. I specifically remember it was actually cold. So, oh man. So, of course, I'm a mindful monk, so I just sadhu and received it. But inside, I was like, yes. And then I got it out of the bowl, and it's like, yeah, it's cold. And just as I was walking through into the sala, one of the novices, the little monks, little 12-year-old, he looked at me with these big eyes. And he looked at my can of Coke with even bigger eyes. And he's like, I was like, oh no. I'm going to have to give it to him now, aren't I? So I did. I gave him the can of Coke. And boy, did it hurt. But that's the voice of conscience, that little voice in your mind is so easily overpowered by the voice of greed. The greedy cat eating the fat will always kill the mouse in the end. I like that just as the mouse was going to say all gone, the cat jumps on him and eats him, so he's literally all gone. So this is the teaching, and it's a beautiful Dhamma teaching as a reminder that the voice of conscience is so easily overpowered by the voice of greed. So easy to find justifications and reasons to justify getting what you want or having what you want. I see this a lot in modern day world. An article I was reading the other day, a woman self-identified as having PTSD and then blamed her company for not taking account of her PTSD, and so she took time off work, and she was off for 5 years, and the company fired her, and she took them to court, and she just won £5.4 million. This is the thing, when you don't have or when your sense of moral righteousness is not strong. It's easily overpowered by your thinking mind, by the little lawyer in your mind. No offense to any lawyers that are here. The little lawyer appears and will justify anything that you want to get. And if you're not careful, then what happens is the world becomes responsible for your happiness or unhappiness. As soon as you're not getting what you want, you look for blame in the world around you, and you lose the sense of responsibility and push that responsibility onto the world. It's up to other people to make me feel happy. They have to call me by the right pronouns. They have to give me the right conditions in my job. They have to take care of my mental health, other people, etc., etc. So there was an article I read recently by somebody who was suggesting that if we live in the way of Dhamma, we should exchange our view of rights. What is my right? And foster instead a sense of responsibility, social responsibility or ethical responsibility. This then gives you a much greater sense of resilience to the society around you when you're not getting what you want, when you don't get what you like. It gives you a greater sense of connectedness with other people, because then you're willing to give the can of Coke to the child for their benefit, not for your own. Interestingly, if I had kept the can of Coke, which was my right, I wouldn't remember that, would I? That wouldn't have any lasting benefit in my mind. It would have pleased me for a few minutes only. Having given it away, that's stuck in my mind as a symbol that if I listen to this small voice rather than the voice of greed, I can inspire myself. I can remember, make this into a symbol that I don't need to be overpowered by my own greed, my own wants, my own expectations of society around me. Gives you a much greater ethical responsibility to the world, but also greater resilience, I believe. So there is a Buddhist story, similar vein to this. In the Buddhist story was of two acrobats, and they have a acrobatic show where one person holds the bamboo pole and the other one balances on the top of the pole. I believe this still goes on in some places in the world. So in this story there's a young man and an old man. And the young man, I presume, goes at the top of the pole because you need balance, right? As you get older, your balance starts to decline quite markedly. I saw this on a TV show where I'm not going to tell you what it is because I'm ashamed at having watched it, but there's a group of people and they had to balance on a beam and place cardboard boxes on this beam, and they split it from the older to the younger, and the oldest was around 70, the youngest was around 20, and it's really quite remarkable. All of the participants to the age of 50 simply couldn't balance on this beam, and they were quite fit, quite healthy, and then as it got younger, suddenly these young guys could balance on the beam. That's what happens with boxers as they get older. That's why they don't have the same reactions. Bernard Hopkins, he won his last great fight. He won at 47 years old, but he was like a phenomenon. He's, incredible. Muhammad Ali's final victory. I always talk about Muhammad Ali. I think he was 38 in his final victory against Leon Spinks. So these two acrobats, the younger one I presume goes at the top of the pole, And the younger acrobat said to the older one, I have this great idea. You need to watch very carefully what I'm doing and give me advice and make sure what I'm doing is correct. And he said, and I will watch very carefully what you are doing and make sure that you are correct. And in that way, the two of us will be able to perform our show with happiness and with ease. And the older acrobat said, no, my young friend, you are mistaken. I should watch what I am doing. You should watch what you are doing, and then we will be able to put on the show. So the meaning of the story is, when we are externally focused, looking at other people, what they are doing, whether they are fulfilling my rights, whether they are looking after me in the right way to make me happy. When we have a society where we are doing that, the society will fall apart. When we have a society where you are focused on your own moral conscience, your own moral guideline, and acting in an ethical way, then the rest of society, if we all do that, will work itself out. Of course, our problem as Buddhists, we can watch over our own ethical responsibility, but the rest of the people don't bother. So maybe it only works if the whole of society does it, and if some do and some don't, I don't know. My experience is, if you are listening to the voice of conscience, that little voice that actually knows what's right and wrong, separate to your desires and your fears, knows what the right thing to do is. If you listen to it, you make it stronger. It gives you a sense of uprightness and a sense of confidence. So I was talking about this today. My friend Marissa, many of you know her. I went to see her today. Qigong teacher, Vipassana and yoga also. She's really thriving with her new studio and making videos. And so we were talking about putting videos on YouTube. And she was saying how she gets some negative comments. And it can really burn her sometimes. And so she was explaining this negative comment that she got. I can't remember what it was, but I said to her, so how many likes did the video get? It's like 5,000 likes. And how many negative comments were there? 1. That's the thing that she looks at. So I also have a YouTube channel, nowhere near as popular as hers. I'm not as beautiful as she is. I'm not as handsome, so I don't get so many likes or comments or views, but still sometimes get negative views. Or somebody says something that's just completely not what I said in the video. And you feel that urge, right? Do you ever see that meme of the monkey on the typewriter? So the first picture is me writing my thesis, and you're like, and the second picture is me replying to a criticism on social media, and there's a monkey going away at the typewriter like this. It's actually true. So my experience is, if you have a good moral compass, which monks, believe it or not, despite what you might read in the Bangkok Post from time to time, actually do live pretty good, straight, moral, clean lives. We really don't go out at night, and we don't drink, and we don't take drugs. And we work a lot in the temple for no immediate reward. You don't get paid or anything for it. It gives you a sense of moral uprightness, which gives you a sense of confidence. This confidence gives you a resilience in the world for when you are attacked or criticized. It has less effect upon you. You expect less from the world. my rights to things are not so important as my responsibilities to things. I read a story today, just to finish off, from England. There's a large estate, 1,000 acres of garden and forest. And the owners of the estate took over the estate in 1695. So they've been there a while. And it's open to the public, free. Anyone can walk in and walk out. So they just decided to fence it off and charge money for people to go in. And there's a big demonstration of people marching, outraged. My right to roam is called My Right to Roam. I'm sure you have a right to roam, but you're roaming in someone's garden. Anyway, I thought it was quite reasonable. The estate are charging £4, it's 150 baht, 160 baht, something like that, for the day to go in, which is not unreasonable. If you want to keep going back, there's a £30 a year fee. Pretty reasonable, I thought. And then if you are a local within that postcode, you can enter and leave for free as often as you want, but you have to pay £10 to have an ID card made up. Needless to say, all the locals are outraged. I thought it's quite reasonable, right? That's not... Anyway, one of the locals said, so now my children have to walk a long way around to school and be endangered on the road, in danger of being mown down by traffic just because they forgot their ID card. I thought it was a little silly. British people are kind of like this. They're very snipey with their neighbours. Whenever your neighbour is building something or making something, they come and complain. Anyway, I thought it was quite reasonable, but they are having this demonstration, my right to roam. So this is what happens when you externalize your feelings, when you outsource your feelings onto other people and other places, then your feelings are easily hurt. Your resilience drops down to nothing. When you take on that ethical responsibility or social responsibility to being willing to act in concert with the society around you, you get stronger, you get more self-confident and self-resilient. You need a lot less from other people. Ultimately, you can become a monk and you need very little from other people. In fact, you just need them to leave you alone. So that's the story of the cat and the mouse in partnership. If you want to look it up, it's a Grimm's fairy tale, original Grimm's fairy tale. There are some probably few elements to the story that I've forgotten about, but you can look up. This sense of hiri odapa, hiri, moral shame, that is the unpleasant feeling that you should have when you do something you know isn't right. This is to be fostered. This is to be encouraged. This is the mouse. Make the mouse's voice stronger. That's hiri, and odapa is the sense of moral dread. That is the fear of blame that people will give you if they see what you are doing. I did read about this one time. Dhamma teacher said you should live your life as if there's a webcam pointing at you. It would change your behavior, right? If you know people are watching. So, are there any questions or comments? Sure.
I was just wrestling with this idea of gratefulness and how it works in with the idea of not preferring or dispreferring things in life. Why then, if you're grateful for a thing or grateful for not having a bad event, how does that work in with that idea?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is the feeling of gratitude. how that works into the picture. The feeling of gratitude fosters the feeling that you have enough. All the bad states of mind come from when you feel that you lack something. So you get caught in greed and desire. Desire and attachment being the cause of suffering, according to Buddhism. So the feeling of gratitude makes you feel like, actually I have enough. I have a good enough society, I have a good enough room to live in, I have good enough friends, I have a good enough family. Otherwise, if you outsource your emotions, then your family aren't good enough. Your mother hasn't said the right things to you, your children are going in the wrong direction. Things are never good enough if you are outsourcing your feelings. So, sense of gratitude, again, gives you this sense of resilience, that actually this is enough and I don't need to add to it. Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
I like the talk very much. I like how you talked about conscience, but if you go to the example of the kind of the park and the local neighborhood and so on.
So you mumbled, I didn't hear.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about the idea of conscience, because oftentimes it's conditioned by who you are. Basically the culture, or kind of, for example, if you go back to the idea of the park and the access to the local neighborhood, there'll be a group of people who would argue these are poorer people who are more vulnerable, and therefore, they need access to places like that. And in saying that, they would kind of feel morally upright, if you like, because they genuinely believe in, for example, wealth redistribution. And so, I'm just trying to understand how you would kind of take an approach to reconcile these differences, because I kind of feel like a lot of conflicts happen because people believe they're doing the conscientious thing, but it's largely conditioned by their setup. And some groups of people, in some certain contexts, violence is even justified, even in religion sometimes. But
Well, you can justify absolutely anything, right? People from ages past to present day can justify war and fighting and killing, but that voice of anger or the voice of greed is always just so much more powerful than that small voice that says, hang on a minute, you might not be doing the right thing. So that's the voice of the mouse, and that's what the fairy tales are trying to teach children, that to pay attention to this little voice inside you that actually knows if you're doing the right thing or not. In terms of an objective classification for how we can say something is right or not, the Buddha was silent on this. Very often he would just give these very short formulas. So the story of the acrobat. He says, watch yourself and society will look after itself. Or I would say, take an ethical responsibility based on your own conscience rather than following the voice of greed or hatred. Then it's up to you. I've never found people, especially in Western philosophy, we always try to make a formula to formalize exactly what's right and wrong. And I think then you just go off track. And then people, well, I have a right to this, well, I have a right to that, and then people get into conflict over it. Because rights means expectations of other people being responsible for my happiness. So, yes, I think the overemphasis on the idea of rights. In China, there's much more emphasis on social responsibility. This is your responsibility to your society and how you should act to help your society rather than my individual rights to get what I want. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should live in China. There are downsides to China too, but that particular idea, I thought was quite attractive. Anyway, in Buddhism, the Buddha very rarely elaborates much on these things. He would say, have hiri odapat. These two things will protect the world. So then it's up to us to figure out how that works. Yeah.
I like to talk as well, and also the topic, and I have similar sort of concerns, which is that in all these stories there is a certain entitlement, but it's also both sides are, let's say, inflated and downplayed, depending on our own worldview. But in the end, it is the state or a company, the boss somewhere, that pushes a certain reasoning that they have, and they have the same cat and mouse type of dynamic, and they in the end are society to to follow their justification for what they want, right? Same level of greed. So that's the difficult part. It's you can of course only think about what you want to pursue in life, but then in the end you go up against society. So how can we go to a China-style social cohesion where do we put that in a Dharma way? Where do we put that goal? That sort of.
Yeah, I don't know. I've noticed something that comes out of Western education, and by that I might mean my own education. But when I was at school, we would write essays about how to solve problems. So I remember writing an essay about how Adolf Hitler solved the economic problems of Weimar Republic. I remember in psychology we'd write essays about how to improve children's education. It's called developmental psychology. But I think it's this is my view, not Buddhist view. I want to separate that. People get churned out of university with these ideas of how we should engineer society. And I think we've just got too many social engineers who are now making decisions for everybody else. And that just seems to make life worse. I'm trying to think of examples, but Maoist China was one example. He tried to control everything. And there was that one thing, he got rid of all the trees that were interrupting the crops, but the trees fed the birds, and the birds spread the seeds, and the crops all failed. And just the attempt to try and manipulate everything seems to me like a disease in society. So many social engineers now who want to enforce upon everybody else what's right and what's wrong. In Scotland, they just passed this hate law. So it's now a crime to be hateful. But the first thing that's going to happen with that, which I agree with, and they put out this really stupid advert, I don't know if you've seen it, with the hate monster. And the hate monster gets bigger and bigger. It's a dumb thing. They were trying to popularize this law. But the first thing that happens with it is it gets weaponized. Now the left-wingers say, well, conservatives are hateful. Nigel Farage is hateful. And then it gets weaponized against each other. And I just think we'd over try to engineer society. We pass more and more and more and more laws and regulations for trying to manipulate or change how everybody's supposed to be. And then what you end up with, you find actually wasn't quite as good as you thought it was. Some years before, Tony Blair had this idea in Britain. He said we should join the EU, what's it called, freedom of movement. It's a great idea that everybody in Europe can go and live in any European country. And he said there will be roughly 80,000 people a year he expected to come into Britain. By the time of Brexit, there was 8 million people from Europe had moved into Britain. and 2 million Brits had moved out, but they hadn't moved to Europe, interestingly. So you can have an idea, but then you enforce your idea and suddenly it doesn't go the way that you told the story to yourself. And I think, personally, again, my view, not Buddhist view, but I think all politicians are doing this. Left and right and different groups, different countries come in with these grand schemes of we're going to engineer society. Do you remember when the military took over in Thailand and they put out these 12 core principles of what it means to be Thai? It's actually not a bad idea, but really when you look at it, it was a form of trying to control the population because they'd engineered this big coup and then they get into power. Now they want everybody to be obedient. So, yeah, I think we over-engineer things, but that's my own personal viewpoint. Artie, you had a comment.
Thank you. I just have a comment, actually.
Good.
I work in the area of corporate responsibility,
Right.
business and human rights, and I've been doing it for quite a long time, and I also get really fed up of, I mean, this is a public talk, so I should be careful, but I also get fed up of hearing about everyone talking about rights and not enough about responsibility.
Right.
And even the term corporate responsibility has kind of been co-opted.
Hmm.
And we've just seen the agreement in the EU of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and everyone's celebrating it. And as a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, I have a problem with that because it shouldn't need a law for anybody to know what their responsibilities are. And people start arguing, as you know, because it's complex. People are complex. You put two people, even one person is complex. And as you said, it's about looking at yourself rather than looking at others and judging them and telling them what the law is. And what you're getting is within large businesses and multinationals, you've got sustainability departments who are trying to do the moral right thing. But then the company is still assessed by the bottom line. And the giant cat of the corporate cat will always want to take the fat.
Right.
And the little mouse in the sustainability department is always going to lose out.
Right.
And that's what's kind of happening
And
now.
the law gets...
Blue washing. We call it blue washing because it's about
Right.
human rights, due diligence, not environment. But there's a lot of blue washing going on and nobody realizes. Nobody realizes.
And then the law gets weaponized, usually from the big corporations against the smaller ones.
That's right. So they push the responsibility further upstream into the supply chain.
Right.
So it's actually all the businesses like in Asia
Right.
that have to take the responsibility.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any solutions for this question. Only your own behavior you can control. Right. Anybody else? Or are we ready to wrap up?
I think it was Confucius who said, if you want to change the world, well, you have to start changing yourself.
Change yourself first, yeah.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Okay, if we're good, we can wrap up. So if we can finish, I'll do the blessing. Sabhitiyo vivajjantu sabbharogo vinasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhiti gayuko Bhava abhivadana silisani changvata pachayino chataro dhamma vadanti ayu vano sukhang balang